Yo, I sometimes hate making beats around my peeps, cause when I press play, they always got something to say like, yo, why your tempo so slow? And yo.
How's it going, everybody? Chase Yee here for another acting tip of the week. I want to thank you all so much for watching. It's a little tricky to kind of teach this because everyone sort of has their own process, and I understand that, but I'm going to try my best to explain how I go about memorizing lines. Okay, because that's something I always get asked by other people all the time. They always ask like, oh, how do you memorize all these lines? Or every time you get a script, is it like, how do you show up on set the next day and have all that stuff memorized and ready to go? The first thing to realize is that when you work in a movie or in a television show or something like that, you're never really expected to know all the lines for the entire project on that particular day. Filming is broken up into scenes, right? So if you're in a movie, if you're gonna do a scene, that's scheduled on a certain day. It's not like you're gonna shoot everything in one day or anything like that, okay? So that's important to know up front. So there's really not a lot of pressure when you get on set. There's tons of time for you to sit around and learn your lines, learn, the dialogue and the exchanges between the different characters. And also then when you get on set and you start to film, things are broken up in so many different ways. Very rarely will you actually get to do a scene all the way through. It's very start and stop. You might say one line from the scene and then they'll move the camera to somebody else's point of view, and then you'll say that line again, or you'll say the next line. So all you really need to know is how to memorize things, piecemeal, one step at a time. And that's for the actual job itself. Now, it's a little bit different when you're trying to memorize lines for an audition, because when you do a self-tape, which, last week I did a video about self-tapes, typically you do have to memorize all the lines so that you can look really good and be in character for that casting director, so they can kind of get a sense of, how you go about fulfilling that role, becoming that role. So in that sense, yes, you do need to memorize lines. It can be a little bit overwhelming, especially if you get sides like this, for example. This was an audition I had a couple weeks ago. They have 3 pages right off the bat. It's like a 2-page scene, and then you have this big monologue here on this final part down here, right? So in that sense, yeah, it's like, oh shit, I gotta memorize all 3 of these by tomorrow. My self-tape's due in 2 days. How do you do that? So like I said, it's not really something you can teach. I can show you, how I go about doing it. Maybe from my experience, you can kind of use that to fold into what you do yourself. I guess, let's just get right into it. How would I go about memorizing something? Okay, so for this exercise, this is just a book of poetry that I had on my shelf. I read a lot. Okay, I would think that that's probably the first thing you really need to do as an actor, someone who memorizes lines. You need to read a ton so that when you look at words, when you go through language, it's easy for you to process. Syntax. Okay, if you don't know what that means, that's the sentence structure, okay, that people use, that writers use. It's the flow of a sentence. And if you can really get an ear for those things and pick up on that, memorizing lines becomes a lot easier because you're anticipating the underlying pattern, the rhythm of the language. And once you get into that rhythm, it's easy to memorize things. So let's just pick a random poem out of here, okay? And I'll just kind of go through the process of how I would memorize it. All right, let's find one here. Let's find one that's not too crazy, all right? Because I don't want to have to. Let's find like a paragraph. Okay, this looks good. This is by a guy named Donald Finkel. Okay, The Hunting Song. All right, and let's look at this first. I don't know if you can see that. This first sort of like paragraph chunk at the top there. Okay, we're gonna look at that. So let's read it first. That's the other thing. Once you have lines, something you need to memorize, just read it. You have to read it over and over and over again. Even if you're not testing yourself to actually memorize it, you're testing yourself to read it, so many times that you can begin to pick up those patterns that I had mentioned earlier. Okay, so here we go. The fox, he came lolloping, lolloping, lolloping. His eyes were bright, his ears were high. He was like death at the end of a string. When he came to the hollow log, he ran in one side and out of the other. Oh, he was sly. Okay? Once again, for me, I would read that over and over again so many times, okay? And you have to block out time to memorize lines. It's not like you can just sit down for 10 minutes and pick them up. Maybe some people can. I don't negate that. I've had instances myself where I've sat down and shit, within minutes I've picked it up. It's just because you get into that flow of it. But for the most part, you need to set aside time to invest in learning them, in internalizing the lines, okay? This is actually pretty simple overall, but yeah, the fox, he came lolloping, lolloping, lolloping. The word lolloping, 3 times he says it here. If you kind of break it down into each sentence, okay, the fox, he came lolloping, lolloping, lolloping. Boom. I've already memorized that sentence. The fox, he came lolloping, lolloping, lolloping. Done. All right, let's look at the next sentence. That's the other thing. You can break things down by sentences. Okay, that's kind of an easy thing to do. That way you're not looking at the whole chunk, the entire piece that you have to consume. It's just, one little piece at a time. All right, so the fox, he came lolloping, lolloping, lolloping. His eyes were bright. His ears were high. He was like death at the end of a string. Got it. So his eyes were bright. Okay, and these are now, if you think about it, these are actually like, descriptive physical features that you can kind of just remember. His eyes were bright. So don't even think about the words. Just remember that his eyes were bright. So the fox, he came lolloping, lolloping, lolloping. His eyes were bright. What was the next thing? His ears were high. He was like death at the end of a string. Okay, so now we're kind of piecing this thing together. Now I'm just remembering. I'm not even really memorizing. I'm just sort of almost painting a picture in my head, and I'm just filling it in with all the color. So the fox, he came lolloping, lolloping, lolloping. His eyes were bright. His ears were high. He was like death at the end of a string. Okay, I've already memorized half of it. I've already got it down. Okay, here we go. Let's just kind of keep processing through this. When he came to the hollow log, he ran in one side and out of the other. So again, this is another descriptive action. So if you kind of think of it as a story that you're telling yourself, all you're doing is just retelling that story. So he ran in when he came to the hollow log. So now I'm envisioning a hollow log. When he came to the hollow log, the fox, he came lolloping, lolloping, lolloping. His eyes were bright. His ears were high. He was like death at the end of a string. When he came to the hollow log, okay, that's kind of the next step of the story. He ran in one side and out of the other. That's pretty easy to process. Don't you think? He's just running in one side and out of the other. When he came to the hollow log, he ran in one side and out the other. Okay, no problem. Oh, he was sly. So that final thing is just sort of like just a period at the end of it, like he was sly. Okay, that's just kind of a thing you can, foxes are sly, obviously. So that's kind of an easy cliche to sort of have in your head. So let's kind of just go through this again. All right, the fox, he came lolloping, lolloping, lolloping. His eyes were bright. His ears were high. He was like death at the end of a string. When he came to the hollow log, on the other side, no, he ran in one side and out of the other. See, so now this is where anytime you kind of trip up, look at it, look at the line. Oh, okay, so he ran in one side and out the other. Oh, he was sly. So now that we've gone through it and I only tripped up at that one spot, you just keep doing it over and over and over again. Repetition. Okay, that's the key to memorizing lines. Repetition. And not repetition looking at a script. Okay, being off book. Like don't look at that and just go through the lines. So the fox, he came lolloping, lolloping, lolloping. His eyes were bright. His ears were high. He was like death at the end of a string. When he came to the hollow log, see, I keep forgetting that one side. What is it? He ran in one side. Okay, see, I gotta remember, he ran. When he came to the hollow log, he ran in one side and out the other. Oh, he was sly. Once again, let's go through it. The fox, he came lolloping, lolloping, lolloping. His eyes were bright. His ears were high. He was like death at the end of a string. When he came to the hollow log, he ran in on one side and out the other. Oh, he was sly. Okay? Let's go one more time. Just that repetition now. See, and even at this point, if you were kind of seated like I am, I'm sitting down, I'm chilling out, I'm just memorizing lines. But if you wanted to stand up, get on your feet, with the lines, that's actually a really good exercise too. I encourage that. I think to bring a scene to life, to bring that character to life means to be on your feet, to be doing things while you're saying those lines, especially, whatever the circumstances are of the scene. If the scene is like you're pouring a cup of water or something, or if you're yelling at somebody, to stand and have that energy can sort of help you remember the physical presence of your body when you're memorizing lines, the physical mind, the physical mindset, the mental mindset of that character. Those are all things that can help you internalize the lines and almost fix it to your memory, your muscle memory also in a way. And that's kind of an interesting tool to help you, and I hope it does. So anyway, let's go through this again. The fox, he came lolloping, lolloping, lolloping. His eyes were bright. His ears were high. He was like death at the end of a string. When he came to the hollow log, he ran in on one side and out the other. Oh, he was sly. Boom. Okay, so I mean, right there, how long did this take? I don't know, 2-3 minutes, right? I've already memorized that first chunk. And that's really it. I mean, I just do that same process over and over and over again. I mean, if, like this monologue here that I had to memorize, this was, I don't know, a few days ago. And I probably spent, I don't know, maybe an hour memorizing this at the most. Because once you read it, once you get into it, and again, you're on your feet, you're acting it out, you're being an actor. That's what helps you also memorize the lines. You can't just fixate on the words. That's not enough. You need to think about how you're going to, convey that character, how you're going to portray that to an audience, to your scene partner, and that's always a big step. Okay, so memorizing lines, in that sense, it becomes really easy. And the other thing to think about too are the lines that you share with the characters in your scene, because there's often dialogue that's happening, right? You're not just reading by yourself. If you're doing a monologue, sure, there's nobody you're reading with. But when you're reading with a scene partner, the other thing you really need to do, and this might sound sort of, simple, but you need to listen. Acting is reacting. Okay, that's an old industry, slogan there. That's the best way to think about acting. Acting is reacting. You're not just thinking in your head. Who in their head thinks about what they're going to say, and they just fixate on what they're going to say, and they're just waiting for that moment to spit it out. No, you don't do that. You listen to who you're talking to, right? And then once you hear what they say, you then react to what they say. So acting is reacting in that sense. So like for this scene here, this character tells the character that I was auditioning for, you ain't told me yet what business you had here. We got no cattle to sell or no ponies. The oat crops are done spoke for, right? And so my character is relieved by that. He just kind of feels, well, I guess that's it. There's nothing else for me to do. So he says, oh, well, you sure relieved my mind considerable. Easy. Okay, so you're reacting. So it's like, if I was just thinking about that line, oh, you sure relieved my mind considerable. Like, just thinking about that line and not listening to what he said. I mean, not listening to the tone and how that character says it, I might not be able to get that same delivery, or the same inflection or whatever. So acting is reacting. Listen to what your partner's saying. And there's key words. Again, here, for example, this character says to me, better not be you. You keep away from her. You hear? So like that's someone threatening you. Okay, you keep away from her. You hear? Right? Like, you hear me? Do you hear what I'm saying? I'm speaking to you. I'm talking to you. Like, so what are you going to say next? So if I was really listening to that character, I would know, you're threatening me, right? So then obviously my next line should come as, a retaliation to, what the other character has just said, right? So this person says, you keep away from her, you hear? And then I say, oh, somebody ought to tell Lori about you and the kind of man you are. So now I'm upset. I'm reacting to what he just said. He's asking for confirmation that I had heard his threat. So now I'm retaliating, with my very own threat to him, like saying, you know what, somebody ought to tell Lori, who was his daughter, your daughter, the kind of man you are. And then I say, for that matter, somebody ought to tell you once about yourself. So I'm alluding to the fact that I'm going to give him a piece of my mind, right? Anyway, those are just little things to think about, okay? Acting is reacting. Listen to the lines of the other character in the scene to help formulate and process your own lines, your own delivery. That's really important. I also think if you have a scene partner to read with, that's a huge benefit. Have a friend, grab somebody, grab your girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, and have them read lines with you so that you can kind of bring the script to life, not just seeing it on paper. Another thing is too, I always print out sides. I can't for the life of me read things on a tablet or my phone, or I don't know. I just think that connection is not... It just doesn't seem authentic to me. So when I print things out on a piece of paper, it's always much better. I love being able to hold them in my hands, taking them, with me places. I always keep a pen on me. I write notes next to the line, like, if I'm supposed to be angry here, okay, angry, upset, happy, whatever. You can write those emotions, little notes to yourself about what to anticipate. I think that's important. So that's really what I do. So anyway, knowing all that, let's go back to this. Let's see if I've retained this, section here, right? So let's not even look at it. The fox, he came lolloping. His eyes were bright. His ears were high. He was like death at the end of a string. When he came to the hollow log, he ran inside. He ran in one side and out the other. Oh, he was sly. Okay, perfect. I mean, it's in my head now. I know it. So that's basically it. Other than that, I mean, I can't help you improve your memory, or your ability to retain, information, that's on you. I know that's a difficult thing to kind of process for yourself, but I hope that you can, use some of these tools that I've maybe shared to help you build that skill in yourself. And I guess if I just had anything to share with you, is that to just read. I mean, you have to read books. You got to keep reading as much as you can. The more comfortable you are with language, the more you can understand the rhythm that language has. It's going to help you become a better actor. It's going to help you memorize lines faster. And it's going to help you just be ready, for any kind of changes. Often, things get rewritten on set. Auditions happen all the time where you have, the initial audition, and then in the callback, they want you to memorize something completely new. And you might even have a day, or they might give you something cold, do a cold reading where you don't have any time to prepare. They're going to give you the script. They'll say, okay, go out in the hall for 5 minutes, familiarize yourself with it as much as you can, then come back in and deliver it. All right. And if you're a good reader, if you have the ability to internalize words and to kind of pick up on those underlying rhythms and patterns, listen to who is speaking to you, react to what they're saying, you're going to do very well. I mean, a lot of the time too, lines are there as a roadmap to kind of help you get through a scene and to carry on the story of what's happening to these characters, okay? But when you're actually in a scene and you're acting, oftentimes improv is a huge thing where you can just react naturally. Even if you don't have something completely memorized, as long as you get that point across, or the right emotion across, or the right feeling, or a paraphrased version of kind of what you're supposed to say, that often does well too in auditions. People like to see that you can think on your feet, that you're able to kind of have a freedom with the character to express yourself in a way that's not so rigid. That's okay too, and you should explore that. Don't be afraid of that. But for the most part, use the lines as your foundation to help build your character. Get your name out there and really do well.
Yo, I sometimes.
Again, I want to thank you guys so much for watching Doyen Artists. We've been, really happy just putting out content every week, offering everyone with some value that you can kind of take away. Acting is a big forte of mine, so that's something I feel like I can kind of, share and give insight on. If you have any more questions, if you want to learn more about Doyen Artists, or if you want to connect with me, please reach out to us on Instagram at Doyen Artists. You can find me on Instagram at ChaseYee_. I hope you subscribe to our channel. And tune in next week for another acting tip of the week. And we look forward to connecting with you. So don't forget to subscribe. And thank you so much for watching.
You'd rather have shiny raps. Come on, who you fooling? I'm all into music. Not only do I like it dirty.